enjoying these Dean Convocations more and more. It's a wonderful opportunity for me to invite people who I consider to be heroes to come meet you and have a chance for you to get exposed to them. And today we have one of the very best, Larry Gelwix. How many of you have seen the movie Forever Strong? Raise your hand if you've seen the movie. Okay, so about a half of you have seen it. That's great. Larry is the story behind Forever Strong, and he will not say that. He'll say the boys are the story. But if you're a coach that has won 379 games and lost only 9, the story has got to be beyond just the boys. There's got to be something else there that's going on. I remember a comment that was made about Coach Adolph Rupp, and most of you in the audience will not remember who he is, but some of you might. Coach Rupp was the head of the University of Kentucky's basketball team way back when. This was long before I was born. So Coach Rupp used to win these national championship have these national championship teams at Kentucky, and what was surprising was he seemed to be doing it year after year after year with about the same kind of natural talent that the other teams had. And he was asked the question, how do you do this? How do you manage to win year after year after year? And yet the natural talent that you seem to have seems to be about the same as what the other teams have. His answer was, I think, very telling. He said, well, I can tell you one thing. If you see a man on top of a mountain, you can be sure he didn't fall there. Larry Gelwix did not fall on top of the mountain that is Highland Rugby. He built it step by step by step. I should tell you that I first met Larry as a result of marrying my wife, Kathy. Kathy is sitting right here with us today. Would you wave to everybody? Thank you. Kathy and I met in 2000 and married in 2001, and I came into Highland Rugby as a result. I kind of married into the family. And Larry will tell you that all of his boys are our family. And we have some of them with us today. I know Alex is here. How many members of Highland Rugby do we have here, or former members of Highland Rugby? Okay, so one over here. Stand up, would you? Stand up, you guys. Let's recognize these guys. Okay. My stepson Andrew and my stepson Anthony played for Highland Rugby, and so I had a chance firsthand to observe Larry as a coach and as a person. Long before we actually got acquainted individually, I just would show up at the games because I was interested in Anthony, who was playing at the time. Andrew had already graduated, and watched, and it was phenomenal. I like to think that I'm a student of leadership, and what I can tell you over the years, as I have observed Larry Gelwix very closely, is he is one of the finest leaders I've ever met. So we've invited you to come today, not just to hear the story about Highland Rugby, not just to hear about Larry's great business career. He is a fine businessman, has run a number of different very successful companies, most recently Columbus Travel, but Morris Travel, Win Air. Many of the young men that have played for Highland Rugby have gone on to very, very impressive business careers of their own. But if I had to boil it down, I would say it's all about leadership. And that's why I've invited Larry Gelwix here to talk to you today, to talk about leadership and what it is that is the magic that makes it possible for young men to go out and put everything they've got on the field. It's really remarkable. There isn't anything that they hold back. Everything they've got goes on to that field. And I think you would, if you had a chance to talk with people who've played for Larry over the years, and he's coached for 34 years, producing 18 national championships. The championships have only been going on for 24 years, 18 of those years. he's produced national championships. 5 of those years they've come in second, and 1 of those years come in 3. If you thought the New York Yankees were ever hated, that's nothing compared to Highland Rugby. They just can't stand Highland Rugby at those national championships. It's because he produces winners year in and year out. That's the story we want to hear, the story that you have the opportunity to hear. We've put a little extra time onto the agenda today. We'll close at 3 o'clock. We've asked Larry to tell the story, you know, in his own way, show maybe a little clip. We've got a few extra cameras here today. I hope that doesn't distract you at all. We wanted to record this event, and then we'll make sure that there's time for questions and answers. Will you please welcome Larry Gelwix.
Now we have to do a quick change. You know, while Doug's giving me his gear, he started out with the story about coaching. All good coaching stories are about Notre Dame, aren't they? Aren't they? My best, and I think is probably responsible for our success, is as the story goes, the football coach at Notre Dame, back when they used to win, so that was a long time ago. I hardly know you. You know, I better stop right there. Well, what does this look like? What I look like? What was it? E2D2 or something? Okay, I got to get better than this. You know. All right, let me tuck this in. Anyway, back to Notre Dame. So the reporter allegedly asked the coach, I understand you have a prayer before every football game. The coach said, yes, we do. Maybe the Aggies should have. You know, I shouldn't say that, Doug. I say stupid things. Anyway, I am just all falling apart here. Okay. Anyway, and then allegedly the reporter said, well, does it do any good? And as the story goes, the Notre Dame coach said, yes, especially when I have big, fast players. And maybe that's the key to our success. We've had some great boys. May I say, with all joking aside, it's an absolute honor for me to be here with you today. I've known Doug for quite some time and had many friends. My business partner was on a sports scholarship here back in the day here at Aggie. And in fact, our company sponsors a track tournament, the Faldmo Invitational Track Tournament here at Utah State. Our roots go pretty deep. I got a call a couple years ago from a movie studio. They just finished filming a movie in New Zealand where so many films are shot. Now, how many saw Lord of the Rings? Wasn't that a great film? That was all shot in New Zealand. And they had fallen in love with the game of rugby. Interestingly enough, rugby is the second most popular sport in the world. It is only bigger, soccer is the only one that's bigger. It eclipses basketball, football, baseball in terms of participants, spectators, TV, and attention by the media. Second most popular sport in the world. And yet we'd had football movies, basketball movies, wrestling, lacrosse, soccer, you name it. But no one had ever made a movie on rugby, the second most popular sport in the world. And so they said, we'd like to do it. But they're an American movie company. They wanted to do an American story. And I got this call saying, and I was impressed with how much research they had done. I mean, they knew everything about me, which is a scary thought and a story for another day. They knew everything about the team. They had done their due diligence. And they said they wanted to make this a film. And we talked for a while. They told me their idea. I didn't know these guys from Adam. And they said, on such and such a day, we'd like to come to Salt Lake City, and we'd like to talk to you in person about the film. And I'll never forget what they said. They said, could we have 15 or 20 minutes of your time? Well, I'm thinking, that's a long way to come for 15 or 20 minutes, but it's your dime and it's your time. So I'd be glad to talk to you. On the appointed day, they showed up in my office in Salt Lake City, and we started talking. 3.5 hours later, they left. Now, I've never asked them this question, but I think I figured out the answer. It's like, you asked for 15 minutes, and you stayed for 3.5 hours. What was up with that? Well, I already figured the answer out, Doug. They'd never met me. They'd only read about me. And I think they decided, busy Hollywood movie types, if I turned out to be some total loser, they wouldn't have to stay for the afternoon. Well, whether I'm a total loser or not is yet to be determined. And, that was the genesis and the birth of the movie Forever Strong, which is our team motto, Kia Kaha, which is Maori for Forever Strong. We have several team mottos. No regrets. Whatever you do, no regrets. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Good decisions don't make life easy, but they do make it easier. It doesn't matter who scores, it only matters that we score. And so over the process of the next couple of months, they asked me to get, I would call them a focus group together, alumni players. Now do the math. I started coaching when I was 25 years old. I've been a high school football coach, a high school wrestling coach, before I went into private business, into the travel industry. So I had that background. I've stayed on as the coach. This spring will be my 34th year as the volunteer coach of the Highland Rugby team, the premier high school team in America. Now do the math. I've coached, for 34 years. I started at 25. I'm 58 years old, be 59 this summer. So my alumni are in their early 50s from the early years. That's AARP, and you'll be managing their portfolios in a year or two with that. But so they had me get alumni from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and 2000. Usually groups of about a dozen former players, and they always had a camera and a sound technician. They're one of these big boom mics, and what they said was, just tell us stories. And these boys started telling the stories about what it was like to play on this team, the experiences they had, how it affected them. And then the screenwriter took all that tape, all that film, and started picking stories. So the stories are true, but you have stories from the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, and 2000, all woven together into a single season. And that's how the movie Forever Strong came about. People are sometimes surprised to learn that I have no financial return on the movie. It was never part of the deal. They made that clear up front. I mean, who would turn down a check? But it was never part of the deal. And I'm really okay with that. But in the production of the movie, which I hope you'll see, and by the way, it had a very successful national release, coast to coast. It was in theaters across the country. And it was 2 months. Now, that is a very long theatrical run for something other than Star Wars or Mission Impossible, which goes on for a long time. Most movies are there, 3 weeks or something like that. 2 months is huge. And then, of course, it goes away and awaits the DVD release. But you've hit the big time when your movie has hit the dollar theater. Well, that's where it is now. Tuesdays, 50 cents, guys. You can even buck up for that. So it's in the dollar theater right now. I got to admit, it's kind of fun. We just enjoy seeing the movie. And for me, it's a very emotional experience every time I watch it, because I lived every one of those stories. I remember every one of those boys. And some of them are 50 plus years old now, and some are 18 and 16 and 25 and 37 and 42 years old. But it's kind of fun to go to the theater. As you walk out, always someone will say, "Hey, isn't that the coach? Is that really him?" So I'm wearing a Groucho Marx, a little mustache and something as a disguise with that. Now, Doug introduced something about the team. I'm going to correct what he said. I appreciate the sentiments. it's not about me. I know my role on the team. I know my function on the team. But it's about the boys. They have to go out on the field. 379 wins and just 9 losses in 33 years. I don't know that there's anything like that in sports anywhere. 18 national championships. And I know my role on the team. And I know my function. But at the end of the day, with a laser-like focus, these boys who are not always the biggest, not always the fastest, not always the strongest, go out and again and again and again, they dominate the sport. What I'd like to do now is show you the movie trailer that has with the film that's appeared in theaters across the country. And the international release will be this spring. Being the second most popular sport, the international release will be huge. You know, football, which we all love, and by the way, Gary Anderson's going to do a great job up here, you know, with your new football program. He's a great coach. I have a lot of respect for him. Football's an outgrowth of rugby. Did you know that? Rugby's a tackle sport. The ball is shaped like a football, just a little bit bigger. But rugby came first. Now in football, you go into the end zone for a touchdown, all right? In rugby, which came first, you go into the end zone and actually have to ground the ball or touch it down, hence the word touchdown. Touchdown is a rugby term. And so there's a lot of similarities. Football, you get 6 points for a TD, 1 point for the conversion. Rugby, 5 points for the score or touchdown, 2 points for the conversion. We have a 3-point kick similar to a field goal. It's a very similar sport with that. But what I'd like to do now is show you the trailer, and then we'll launch into our discussion today. So we could do that now, please. How's that?
On the field, where tradition is king, where coaches are legend, warriors will rise.
We try. You try, you sit. This is about doing.
Dad just wants you to win.
He wants to win. Has nothing to do with me.
I won't play for your team. I'll play for myself. Richard Penning Jr., this is your second DUI. You are a ward of this court.
Hey, Penny, you too pretty to play? I know you play rugby. I know you've heard of Highland. Yeah, we beat you. You come fight our home.
With nothing left to lose, Rick Penning has a chance
Most of what we do here, I learned playing rugby from Coach Gelwix.
to discover what it takes to be a champion.
Welcome, gentlemen, to Highland Rugby. You know exactly why I'm here, and you still act like you care. You just gotta learn to listen. I score. That is what I do.
I guess I have to keep my eye on you, huh?
His will be tested.
Dad, grab your stuff. You're coming on. I'm sorry, I didn't see this coming.
His dedication will be
Where's
tried.
the loyalty, man? We deserve that title. What do you mean we?
Not bad for a rookie.
His reward will be freedom.
I play for Highland. I only want him to have what I never had.
What makes you think that he wants what you never had?
Gelwix stole my life. Hey, give me mine back! Come on, let's do this! We will show our best today. I want you to be forever strong on the field, so you'll be forever strong off it.
You know, I remember all those boys. I I remember all those stories, you know, and hundreds and thousands of other stories. It's always tough for me when I watch that film. You know, it was all cast out of Hollywood. You remember Rudy, Sean Astin? He was Sam in Lord of the Rings. He's in the film. How many saw Never Back Down? It's kind of a guy film. There's chick flicks. This is a guy flick. You know, Sean Ferris is in this film, and Neil McDonough, Band of Brothers, Minority Report. Gary Cole took my character. Did you see Talladega Nights? The drunk dad? That's Gary Cole. Typecasting, I suppose. Office Space, Pineapple Express, and a lot of other films. Penn Badgley, who's the heartthrob now in Gossip Girls. And I mean, it goes on. It was a great experience. I'll just tell you this one story before we enter our discussion. Is they had me mic'd during the season leading up to the filming. They wanted to capture things that I said. I'm glad that everything I said didn't appear in the film. But one thing I tell the boys all the time is, right before we go on the field, I tell them, no regrets. Doesn't matter who scores. It only matters that we score. And the last thing I say to them before they take the field is, hit them so hard you make them cry. That one did make it into the film with that, but it's a weird experience standing for me to this gentleman here. They invited me to come on the set anytime I wanted, and I'm watching someone who is my character, answering to my name, saying things that I say all the time. Sometimes I'd sit back and I think, you know, I don't say it like that. Or I'd say, hey, he says it a lot better than I ever did. I'm going to have to remember that. Now, anyway, 379 wins, 9 losses, 18 national championships. I am asked the question, why is this team so successful? What are the pillars of leadership and success that have attributed to something that's probably never been done before in sports? I'm going to attempt to answer that question for you today. And I want to introduce 5 pillars of success. These are things that I sit the boys down. Christian and Alec will tell you about once a week I sit the boys down, and the boys call them Gelwix-isms. And I'll talk to them for about 10 or 15 minutes. And you know when you talk to a young man? At the end of practice, at the end of a tough practice, when he's tired and he's beat and he's been knocked down and he learns to get up. He's gotten his nose bloodied and he wipes it off and gets up and faces the challenge again. That's when you talk to them, because it internalizes it. And these 5 pillars that I'm going to share with you are exactly what I tell these boys. Number 1, horizontal leadership. There's 2 types of leadership philosophies or management philosophies. There is vertical leadership, which is the most common. You have the boss, the coach, who's ever in charge, the drill sergeant who's up here. You got most everybody else down here. And other than a few little pets who can get away with anything, you're never good enough. In other words, if you succeed, it's brilliant coaching. It's a great CEO. It's a wonderful president. But if you mess up, if you lose, it's a bunch of mess-up players. It's the employees. In other words, you can never be good enough. It's ego-driven. It's all about me. I've got to look good. And for me to look good, you have to look less than good. We can't share the same stage. This is the most common type of leadership in the world. And while you can have successes, you will never succeed. The other type of leadership is what I call horizontal. In horizontal leadership, everybody is the same in these terms. Everybody has the rights of human dignity, of human respect, of not being humiliated in front of their peers, of not being ripped apart. What is the difference between the coach and the players, the CEO and the department manager, and the entry level, the custodian and the vice president? It's their responsibility. It's their job. I consider myself equal to the 9th grader who comes on the team. Now, I'm not just saying that. I flat out consider myself the same. That kid has a right of human dignity and respect. And so do I. I have a different job. I'm the coach. I'm to teach, to motivate, to inspire, and to manage the game. He has a different job. He's to learn. He's to motivate himself. He's to motivate his teammates. And he is to play with perfection on the field. That's our goal. Sure, we make mistakes, and we allow for that. But we don't consider them acceptable. But we don't beat anybody up. Now, I'll tell you, why is it that someone will, you hear these stories in the military, someone throws themselves on a grenade to save their brothers in arms, to save their comrades. You look at the early history of the pioneers who settled this state, enormous sacrifices. You look at the history of this nation, and people made sacrifices I can't even imagine. Signing the Declaration of Independence was a death sentence. And yet they did it. And today, in Logan, in Cache Valley, in southern Utah, in California, in New York, in Japan, in South Africa, in England, all around the world, in families, in businesses, and communities, people make enormous, quiet sacrifices that none of us will ever know about. Why? Because they believe in something bigger than themselves. It's not about me. Not about me. Now, I've seen in sports, I've been a football coach, I've been a wrestling coach, been a rugby coach, I've been around sports a lot. I have seen coaches terrorize players. Have you ever seen that? Maybe some of you. And have you ever play sports and just get shredded by your coach? Humiliated by your coach? You know, there's no such thing as negative motivation. There is not. Now, you can terrorize someone. You can threaten an employee with his job. You can threaten a student. You can terrorize somebody in your organization, and you will get a short-term behavior change. But you'll never capture their heart and their loyalty. They'll never throw themselves on a grenade for you. They'll never cross the Rubicon and burn the bridge for you, your company, your team, or whatever. But when we believe in something that's bigger than ourselves, it's all about character. It's all about integrity. Now, you're going to enter the world of business, of arbitrage, option dealing, mutual funds, all sorts of wonderful things, boutique shops, major corporations. You know what it comes down to? You know what financial success really comes down to? People. It comes down to people. And I'm going to tell you something that a friend of mine who was president of a Fortune 50 company told me. He says there's a book on everyone. This is a direct quote. And the book is amazingly accurate. And the book follows you around. It's integrity. It's character. It's horizontal leadership. That's what it comes down to. I'll tell you one thing I learned from my sweet wife, Kathy. She taught me this early on in our marriage, and I've never forgotten it. I'm going to pass it on to you. If you want to know what someone is really like, I mean, inside, any of us can put up a veneer, any of us can put on a show, can't we? Sooner or later, that facade wears off, and you find out sometimes to your detriment that you've been had. Now, if you want to know what a person's character is really like, I'm going to tell you the secret. It never fails. You watch how a person treats someone they don't need. Now think about that. Who do you need right now? You need your professors. You need your employer. You need the policeman who pulls you over for speeding. You need the judge that you're standing in front of. You see, you need people who can advance you, who can help you, who can do something for you. Whatever your cause is, whatever your situation or station is in life, they can advance it. Your prospective employer, the interviews that you'll be going through, the internships that you hope to land, they can help you. And it is so easy to be cool to them, isn't it? So easy to be a team player. How about the clerk in the retail store you visit? How about the person who serves you food? How about the person that you pass in the hallway? How about the homeless? How about most of the people that you deal with? You don't, quote, need them, because there's nothing they can do to advance your station or your position, is there? But you watch how someone treats them. And if they treat them with dignity, courtesy, and respect, those are horizontal leaders. Some of you will go on to lead companies. Some of you will go on to be very important players in whatever business direction you choose to take. Be a horizontal leader. It's not about you. So first is horizontal leadership. Number 2, don't play with snakes. Don't play with snakes. Let me tell you about a player on our team. This happened in the summer of 9th to 10th grade. He told me this in his 11th grade or junior year. And his name was Mike. He walked out into his garage. It was during the summer. In between school, sees a snake. Walks up to it. He'd handled snakes, loved animals. It's a rattlesnake, but just a little baby one, just a couple of rattles. He picks it up. He'd handled snakes before, and he's holding it by the back of the neck. I've never figured out, Doug, if snakes have necks. Does a snake have a neck? I don't know. We'll go to the zoology department and find out. Well, we'll call it the snake neck. You know, he's holding it back there, and you hold it, and, you know, the mouth opens up, the fangs are there, and the venom drops out. All the kids in the neighborhood are coming over, and it's kind of like, yeah, you know, stuff like that. It's a guy thing with a snake, you know. and, you know, he's just having a great time. He's playing with it for about 15 minutes, and someone calls his name, hey, Mike, and he turns, and ever so slightly, he loses the grip. It comes down and bites him on his pinky finger. Now, he had health problems for years. Some reaction to the medicine, his bones became more brittle. He had an adverse reaction to the anti-venom serum, and he had problems. And so I'm listening to this story, absolutely incredulous. And I finally say, wait a minute, Mike, let me see if I got this right. You walked out into your garage. Yeah. You saw a snake. Yeah. It was a rattlesnake. Yeah. You picked it up? Well, yeah, I'd handled snakes before. It wasn't a problem. I'd never had any problems with it. You played with it? Yeah. It bit you. Yeah. Oh, Mike, why did you think this was going to turn out any other way than you're going to get bit sooner or later? That's what rattlesnakes do. They bite people. And he said, well, I had done it before. I'd handled snakes, even venomous snakes. I said, sooner or later, you're going to get bit. You know exactly how it's going to turn out. What I taught him in this lesson is there is a right and there is a wrong. And the push in life today, the push in business today, is to eliminate the right and the wrong, and it's all opportunity morality, opportunity values, situational ethics. There is a right and there is a wrong, and you are going to be put in situations where it's easy to justify playing with snakes. Rattlesnakes are the things that are just not right in business, in your personal life, in your situation. Now, you try to tell me right now that in this whole subprime mortgage business that people did not know that it was going to turn out and bite them. You try to convince me of that, because you can't. At some point, the whole system, the whole structure of subprime mortgages is going to fail. But the opportunity, right now, I'll play with the snake. Don't do it. It's not worth it. There is a right and there is a wrong. You know what the hardest thing in business to do is? Is to say no to a good idea. To say no to a profit opportunity. Sometimes you say no because you keep your focus. You keep your focus. Other times you say no because you're playing with a rattlesnake and you know it in your heart that it's not right. And at some point, it's going to blow up on you. John Huntsman, Winners Never Cheat, for whom this school, I believe, is named. Did you ever read chapter 3? Chapter 3 is play by the rules. He says, compete fiercely and fairly. I think that's great advice. You know, we had one team rule on the Highland Rugby team. We only have one team rule. That is, you don't do anything that would embarrass you, your family, or this team. It's the only rule we had. The only rule. Now, within that, obviously, there's a wide net. And I would say to you that the company that you will work for has the right to demand an ethical employee. I assume that all or most of you will marry someday, or perhaps some of you are married now. Your spouse and your children have the right to demand an ethical mother or father. A father or mother that does not play with rattlesnakes. Have you ever had anyone lie to you? I don't know your name, young man in the blue. What's your name? Craig. Craig, can we just role play something for a minute? Craig, you ever had anybody lie to you?
Yes.
Yeah. How did you feel when you found out that you'd been lied to?
I felt taken advantage of.
Yeah, betrayed, cheated. And what did you think, what did you feel when that same person who had lied to you, the next time they told you something?
I didn't believe them.
You didn't believe them. That's the truth trap. I'm telling you guys, you play with rattlesnakes, you lie, you cheat, you even color the truth. And let me tell you, Craig, what the essence of a lie is. In business or in life. The essence of a lie is not the words you choose, but the message that you convey. What's your name, young man? RJ. Okay, let's just say that Craig and RJ are buddies and live in the neighborhood, and Craig's my son, okay? And I say, Craig, I don't want you going to the movies tonight. So Craig goes over to RJ's house, hangs out, they go to the movies. Craig comes home and I say, good to see you, son. What'd you do tonight? And he says, oh, I went to RJ's. Now, is that an accurate statement, factually accurate? Yes, it is. Is it a lie? You better believe it is. Because the essence of a lie is not the words you choose, but it's the message that you convey. In business, full disclosure isn't always necessary or advisable. But deceitful disclosure, when you intentionally mislead people, is wrong. It's flat out wrong. I don't care what the profit opportunity is. Have you ever had someone who has so carefully crafted their words that they give an impression that's inaccurate, and when you call them on it, what do they say? Oh, I didn't lie to you. And they carefully reconstruct every truthful segment taken as a whole gives a false impression. Don't play with snakes is ethical leadership, one of your pillars. Don't play with snakes. Horizontal leadership, don't play with snakes. Let's go to number 3. See the finished product. Championships are not won in May. That's when our championship tournament is. Championships are won in January, February, March, and April. That's when we win the championship. That's when we prepare ourselves. I can tell you that when a kid comes out, let's take a gangly little 9th grader, because they're, you know, I got to tell you, 9th grade boys are pathetic. They're out there, they want to be cool, but they just don't want to be noticed. You know, they just want to fit in. They just want to be accepted. And horizontal leadership does that. You know, we appoint mentors of the older boys to look after the younger ones and show them the ropes. They can, do you know what it means? You remember back in high school, you have some guy who's bigger than life. Maybe he's the captain, maybe he's the SBO president, maybe he's something. And he's bigger than life in high school, okay? And can you imagine what it means for bigger than life John? He's walking down, and here is the lowly 9th grader, Greg, and John says, "Hey, Greg, good to see you. We'll see you at practice today." And Greg is standing with his peers, and John has acknowledged him. Now, that sounds almost silly now, but you remember what it was like in high school? It is so important. In fact, you know, I talked to a friend of mine who is with a great M&A firm on Wall Street, Greenhill, one of the best M&A firms there is. And I asked him, I told him I was coming here, and I asked him what the single most important thing I could tell this group. And he said, relationships. This assumes competency. You get the job done. But it's relationships and networking, he says, and tell them never burn those relationships. I talked to another friend of mine, former president of Burger King International, the whole worldwide. Asked him what the most important thing that I could tell this group, and he says, tell them to earn a mentor. You notice he didn't say find a mentor. Earn a mentor as you go out in business. And by the way, you don't need to wait until you leave this school. You look at the faculty here. There are some tremendous men and women that can mentor you. And that is part of relationships and networking. When I see a boy come out as 9th grader, I don't see him in my mind as a 9th grader. I see him as a grown-up senior, 17, 18 years old. And I try to treat him in that same mode. I see him as the finished product with that. What it gets down to is horizontal leadership and how you treat people. I remember a former player, Kathy may know him, Matt Parkin. He's Dr. Parkin now, an endodontist that I am seeing for a root canal in the morning. It's his chance to get back at me. But he told me a story a few years ago. Now, he's probably mid to late 30s now. He's a very successful endodontist in dentistry. And he said, and I remembered the incident, we were in California for some games. We're sitting at the Oakland airport. And I walked up to Matt, Dr. Parkin now, and I sat down with him, and I asked him for his suggestions. Now, we'd won all of our games. We were undefeated, but I said, Matt, what can we do to become a better team? What can I do to become a better coach? And he and I talked for half an hour, and he gave me some wonderful suggestions. Now, fast forward that years later, and he told me that he had never forgotten, and his life changed. He said, you changed my life that day because you asked my opinion. You treated me as an equal. My opinion was valued. It wasn't gratuitous. You can see through that, can't you? But it's how you treat people. You see the end product. Some of you will go in at entry level in business, and you'll go on to manage companies. Some of you will go on to manage large corporations. Some of you will manage smaller or mid-size. See the final product in R&D, and most importantly, in people. Don't see them as they are, because you don't want to be judged where you are now. I remember we were talking at lunch about awards banquet. The end of every season, we have this great awards banquet. And I remember this was 3 years ago. A boy came up who had played 4 years for me as a senior, and he said to me, Coach, and it was just a wonderful evening. He said, Coach, I have played 4 years for you. I never once played on the varsity. I didn't even suit with the varsity. But I want to tell you, this was the greatest experience of my life. And this is what I learned. He went right down the list. You see, it's how he was treated. He had value in that. See the final product with that. I want to tell you that attitude and effort are more important than natural ability. Attitude and effort are more important than natural smarts. My son, who actually got his MBA from the University of Chicago and is working as an investment banker now in Chicago, I sat him down his 9th grade year. Sat him down and I said, son, I don't care about your grades. Well, he kind of thought that was pretty good. I remember him kind of smiling. I said, oh no, wipe the smile off your face. It's far worse than that. I care about your attitude. I care about your effort. I care that you do your best. This is something we tell the boys all the time. Do your best. I said, now, if you come home from school with your report card and it's a D, and you can look me in the eye and convince me that that is absolutely the best that you can do. You did everything you could. You went to the teacher. You got a tutor. You went for extra credit. You asked me for help. If you can convince me that a D is absolutely the best, sidebar here, F is unacceptable. I am convinced in our public schools that an F is harder to get than an A. It's true. You have to be dedicated. You have to be focused. You have to be single-minded to get an F. The system does not want to fail people, does it? It's hard to get an F. I admire those people. But, so we'll take a D. We'll take a D. I say, you convinced me that that is absolutely the best. How can I ask you to do more than you are capable of doing? How can I ask you to do more than your best? I can't. So I'm okay with it. But you come home with an A, heaven help you, if you tell me, you know, Dad, that was cake. I sloughed class. I was the teacher's pet. I didn't do anything. I said, son, you and I have got a serious problem. I don't care about the A. I don't care about the grade. I care about the attitude and I care about the effort. As you take your careers, whatever direction you want to go, in whatever field you want to go, attitude and effort win championships. I know that to be a fact. Attitude and effort will separate you. Attitude and effort will network you in relationships. This assumes competency. Attitude and effort are everything. Don't lose sight of people in all of this process. Attitude and effort, see the finished product. This is global vision, another one of your pillars. Horizontal leadership. Don't play with snakes, and see the finished product. Let's move on to number 4. Focus on the final score. This is so important as a coach, that you focus on the final score. Now, I won't use rugby as the metaphor here. Let's use, say, basketball. You guys got a great basketball team. But let's just say you're a basketball player. Utah State. And somehow you knew with an absolute assurity, no maybe involved, you knew with an absolute assurity that you would win the game, and you even knew the score on one condition. One condition. You gave an honest, best effort, attitude and effort. Now, perfect effort? No, you're allowed penalties. You're allowed turnovers. You're allowed missed shots. But you honestly gave it your very best effort. You didn't slide by. The greatest, the biggest threat to great is good, is almost. You're going at 70 or 80%. I see this in athletes all the time. And it's unacceptable. They can get by at 80% and still win. We don't care about the grade. We care about the attitude and the effort. Now back to our basketball example. Just suppose you knew the outcome of the game, other than running to Vegas and finding your bookie. It would be an interesting affair, wouldn't it? But suppose you knew the outcome of the game, only dependent upon your attitude and effort, your honest effort. Now, if you were down by 30 points at halftime, and you'd been given an honest effort, would you quit? No. You already know the final score. Suppose you were up by 30 points at halftime. Would you start to coast? Would you start taking it easy? Would you start taking shortcuts? No, because you're focused on the final score. Suppose you're down by 10 points with 30 seconds to go. Would you panic? Would you give up? No. You already know the final score. And so you stay the course. Well, we don't know the final score in basketball. And we don't know the score of each quarter of our lives, be it personal or professional. But I want to tell you, you establish a goal of not what you want to be. How many times have you been asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you graduate? What do you want to do? What is the wrong question? Let me tell you what the right question is. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? And everything flows out of that. Who is ethics? Who is integrity? I sit the boys down all the time and I tell them, you know, we have our one rule. Within that rule is a lot of stuff. You don't drink, you don't do drugs. That's all in that wide net. If you get involved in that, you'll be suspended for the team. Usually a week or two. Parents always get involved. No, we just don't like that. Always we involve the parents. But if you lie, if you cheat, we love you, but you're gone for the season. I have let captains go for the season because they cheated at school. We are men of integrity. And as hard as that lesson is to learn, how much easier it is to learn in high school sports than when you get out in the real world. Be men and women of integrity. Be men and women of honesty. You're going to get some penalty flags and fouls and missed shots along the way. You're going to have some people take advantage of you. But you determine what the final score of your life is by not what you want to be, but who you want to be. What is your final score? You know, forgive me, I've really debated whether to include this next section. My wife and I talked about it, and I was honestly indecisive coming in. I think I'm going to share this with you when you talk about working with people. We've talked about horizontal leadership. We've talked about don't play with snakes. We've talked about see the finished product. We've talked about focus on the final score. I got a call, and I'll tell you why it's tough. I got a call because it's about me. I'm very comfortable talking about these principles. I'll tell you, these principles are principles of success that do not fail and cannot fail. They will not fail in any situation. I know that. I've tested that for 34 years. I'm very comfortable talking about this. I'm not comfortable talking about myself, lest I become the focus because we are horizontal, lest you think it's self-promoting. Forgive me for a personal reference or two. I say this to teach a principle. It's not about me. The story. Got an interesting call from a gentleman, Greg Mckeon was his name. He lives in California. I've never met him. Spoken to him on the phone a couple of times. He's a Stanford MBA graduate. He has a leadership training and management training company. He goes in and consults with some pretty heavy hitters and about leadership. He's currently writing a book. He attended a leadership seminar in California. The leadership seminar was the movie Forever Strong. They showed it, and they discussed this unique style of leadership of this crazy coach in Utah. I didn't even know this happened. He was blown away, as was this large seminar. And, you know, I'm easy to find. I'm in the phone book. So he called directory information and got a hold of me and just wanted to talk. It's been interesting. I have had calls not only from across the country, but from around the world. Australia, New Zealand, England, South America, people who've seen the film. People that said, we just wanted to talk to the real coach. It's been wonderful. And I know it's not about me. It's about the team. The team, see, it's big team. It's little me. We keep our egos in check, you know. And so he wanted to talk to me. He says he's writing a book on leadership and has decided to add a chapter on the Highland Rugby team. And we've talked several times since then. Then he said he'd like to talk to some players from different eras and ask them some questions, send them some email questions. And he just wanted to talk initially to about 8. Eventually he'll want to talk to dozens. But he sent me some of he asked them questions. Will you forgive me for, I'm uncomfortable reading about myself, lest it be misunderstood. But it goes to teach a principle that we've been talking about today. The question that was asked, and I just brought a couple of them here. The question, here's a question, how much of you did Larry get out of you? And how did he do it? Here's a doctor in Miami, played for me. Larry inspired me to play at a higher level than I expected of myself. He did that by telling me I was tough, telling me I was a champion, telling me I was a hard worker, and that he admired me. I believed everything Larry told me, and hence I played like he told me I would. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy placed in my head by Larry. I clearly remember first that Larry cared about me. I remember playing poorly one game and being disappointed with my play. Larry, I think, sensed this, and after the game took me alone to the sidelines, looked me in the eyes and said, Paul, I want you to know I think you're a tough kid. You're a hard worker. You're a champion. I'm so grateful you joined our team this year. That compliment elevated my play to a new level, and I believed him from that day forward. Here's another response to the same question. This fella is probably close to 40, one of the most incredible entrepreneurs I've ever known. Set up a physician's licensing business and helps physicians across the country get licensed. His response, Larry got more out of me than any coach or leader I had. I was a good athlete, not a great one, but Larry interacted personally with me in a manner that elevated my view of myself. He didn't overcomplicate things. Larry's very good at understanding his audience. The keys of Larry's message were reduced to their essence and were reinforced constantly. Here's one from a law student currently at George Washington University. Larry has a unique coaching style. The best way I can describe him is that he is a principle-focused coach. He teaches principles like integrity, team above individual, tradition, honor, and commitment. He always emphasizes team over individual, but he is an individual-focused coach. He believed in me. He saw the potential in me as a player before I even saw it in myself. Here's from a young man at the University of Utah. Both my football coach and Larry shared the same fundamental goal to win. but they pursued this goal in very different ways. My football coach used manipulation with his players. Larry used persuasion. My football coach resisted player leadership, wanting the power, glory, and authority for himself, while Larry encouraged and facilitated player leadership. My other coach would yell at us and grow angry at us, while Larry would teach, correct, and motivate players. This isn't to say that Larry would baby his players, far from it. If I made a mistake while playing for Larry, I would hear about it from him, and he could be intense. But I never once remember feeling torn down by him. Instead, I felt he focused on the mistake and how to help me avoid making it again. And then there's a couple of others. Now, again, forgive me for a personal reference. But I wanted to read that only because it teaches a principle. We talked about a football coach and a rugby coach, horizontal leadership. It's about people. It's about seeing the potential in people. As you go on to leadership roles, see the end from the beginning, as Stephen Covey would put it. See the potential. See the finished product. I've introduced 4 principles to you. And those are horizontal leadership. Don't play with snakes. See the finished product and focus on the final score. Now let's wrap it all up together. Number 5. This then pulls it all together, and this will be your ultimate key to succeed or fail. Number 5. Get out of the boat and drive the wagon. Let me tell you one of my favorite stories. It comes from the Bible. Not in a denominational sense. It's a great moral teaching. In the 14th chapter of Matthew, as the story relates, Jesus was walking across the water to his followers or disciples in the boat. There was a storm. Do you remember what his group was doing? They were cowering in fear. Peter gets up, as this story relates, and you remember what he does. He walks on the water with Jesus. His faith begins to weaken. He starts to sink. I think it's really interesting the way the biblical writer put it, that Jesus Christ immediately grabbed him and pulled him in. Now, what's the point of this story? I think that Peter gets a bum rap in this story, because we always talk about his failure and his sinking. It's the wrong message. You know what the right message is? Where were the other guys? They were in the boat. They were cowering in fear. They were paralyzed, and they didn't do anything. Peter got out of the boat. He tried it. Yeah, he sunk. And that happens in rugby. You get knocked down and you get back up. You get a bloody nose and you wipe it off and you go at it again. You will fail. You will have setbacks. But they will be ethical failures. They will be ethical setbacks. But darn it, get out of the boat and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Because if you're going to make some mistakes, and you will, now's the time to do it. Not when you're my age. Now's the time to go out and take a chance. Don't be afraid. Don't be paralyzed by the fear of failure. Get out of the boat. Now, the second part of that. As the story goes, as the early settlers of our valleys were leaving Illinois, coming across the frozen river, they were in wagons. I love the story. Have you ever been to Alaska or to some place where you see icebergs calving? Have you ever been on a glacier and you hear that deep, bellowing, cracking sound of ice breaking? It's scary. I mean, it is a deep, resonating, bellowing sound that is terrifying because you have no control over it. There's nothing you can do. You're just there for the ride. Well, as the story goes, the wagons were coming across the frozen river, and the ice starts to crack. And as the story is told, one of the teamsters said to Brigham Young, "Brother Brigham, the ice is cracking. Shouldn't we stop and say a prayer?" And as the story is told, Brigham Young wheeled his horse right around, got in the guy's face and said, "Brother, we said our prayers this morning, now you drive that wagon." I like that. There's a time to pray. And there's a time to drive the wagon. There's a time to study. There's a time to drive the wagon. There's a time to plan. There's a time for R&D. And there's a time to get out of the boat and drive the wagon. And some of us spend so much time in planning, paralyzed by fear, afraid we may look dumb, afraid we may fail, that we don't get out of the boat and we don't drive the wagon. We're content to be second place. I'm not content to be second place. We're content to sit on the bench. I'm not content to sit on the bench. We're content to be on the JV. I'm not content to be on the JV. Get out of the boat and drive the wagon. Find a direction. Find something that you're passionate about. Maybe it's finance, HR, accounting, boutique companies, large companies, M&A, R&D, any of these things. You find something that you're passionate about and then go after it. It's not work, it's a joy. You know, I was CEO of an airline. We had it was a charter airline. We had 9 737s. And we were flying all over the country in the Caribbean. I got to tell you, that was a fun job. You walk out on the tarmac, there's that whiff of jet fuel in the air, and you look at this plane, and you think, that's my plane. Where do I want to go today? It is fun. That was a fun job. I have a passion about travel. You know, I have a radio show. In fact, it's a syndicated from Idaho to Arizona. It's being picked up in Denver next month and in the western states. In fact, you can listen to it. KVNU 610 in Logan and Cache Valley. Thank you very much. But I have a passion for it. I love travel. Find something that you are passionate about and then chase after it. Number 1, horizontal leadership. People matter. How you treat them, as we heard from these responses. People matter. Number 2 is don't play with snakes. See the finished product. Focus on the final score and get out of the boat and drive the wagon. One last concept and we'll go to Q&A. Do you understand the difference between emotionally and intellectually knowing something? I'm going to throw you back to high school. You remember the first day you walked into high school? Now, intellectually in your head, you knew that in 3 or 4 years, depending on your school, you're going to be out of here. But in your heart, it's like, I'm going to die here. I'll never get out of this place. Because there's always a tomorrow. Remember the first time you came to Logan? First time here at Utah State as an undergraduate or as a graduate student? Intellectually in your head, you know that in 1 or 2 years or whatever it is, you're done, you're out of here. But it keeps going on and on. You're going to die in Logan. You're never going to get out of here, and it's going to be winter 12 months a year. And you know what I'm talking about. The tough thing is understanding that at some point we run out of tomorrow. See, we keep putting things off. We keep putting off getting out of the boat and driving the wagon because we have a tomorrow. And I see this at graduation in high school all the time where suddenly, like slam, it hits them. And they have run out of tomorrows. And there's nothing you can do about it. Well, the day's going to come with whatever you want to accomplish here at Utah State University. I promise you, you're going to run out of tomorrows. You don't think that now, but do you emotionally buy into it that you want to maximize every precious opportunity that you have to your advantage right now? Because you will run out of tomorrows. And that'll be the same thing when you're out in the workforce. It'll be the same thing when you're married and have children. At some point, you run out of tomorrows, which brings us to one of the mottos of our team, no regrets. Whatever you do, guys, flat out, no regrets. Leave this great university, no regrets. Be in a relationship, no regrets. Go to work wherever your life may take you, and whatever you do, no regrets. And you'll have no regrets if you are a horizontal leader. You'll have no regrets if you don't play with snakes. Remember, snakes are the things that you know they're wrong. You think about the problems that you have in your personal life, the problems you have in your professional life. You really going to convince me you didn't know they were wrong? You really didn't know they were rattlesnakes? And you can play with that snake over and over again like a subprime mortgage. But sooner or later, you're going to get bit. That's ethics. That's right and wrong. You will have no regrets if you don't play with snakes. You'll have no regrets if you see people and projects as the final product. You have that vision. You will have no regrets if, I guess the class is over. Doug, you could have said it a little nicer.
Big finish.
Yeah, big finish. You will have no regrets if in your personal life, in your professional life, you focus on the final score of not what you want to be, but who you want to be. You will have no regrets if you get yourself out of the boat and you drive your own wagon. It's been a pleasure to be with you. I hope there's something in these comments that is a benefit, and I'll just close with this and we'll go straight to Q&A. Some of you are going to blow me off. That's okay. It really is. We'll probably never see each other again. All right? Some of you are going to internalize it. But I want to tell you something. I've been around the block a couple times. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've done a lot of good things. I've had the most exciting life you can possibly imagine. I've owned a company with over 400 employees and 45 offices. I have run an airline. I have lived with Aborigines, the real deal, hunting with a spear in Australia. The things that I have done, I have been walking and trekking without a rifle and just a long spear in Africa in lion country. You know, I have done, that's another story for another day. I have lived the most charmed, exciting life imaginable. But what I'm going to tell you right now, some of you will internalize. The 5 things that I've told you are true. They are pillars of success that not only will not fail you, but cannot fail. They will not fail. You put them into your business, you put them into your student life, you put them into your relationships, you put them into your professional life, you put them into your personal life. You will not fail. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Are we ready to go out and take the field? We take them on?
Who'd like to ask the first question?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that one of your colleagues said earn a mentor.
Yes.
How, do you have any suggestions on how to do that?
I'll answer.
The question was, how do you earn a mentor?
And I would invite Doug to speak into my tie. You know, earning a mentor puts the responsibility on you, son, not on the mentor. We are attracted to people that are competent, that are honest, and can get the job done. We don't care what gender they are. We don't care what race they are. We don't care what they look like. What we're looking for, particularly in business and in a bigger sense in life, is honest, competent people. And the difference between finding a mentor, it's like you're seeking them out and just grabbing them. When you earn it, it's a two-way connection. It's networking, and that relationship, as my friend at Greenhill, the M&A firm, said, is probably the single most important thing that you can do. Doug, any comments on that?
No, I think it's absolutely correct. And, you know, it's a little bit like what Larry is saying about don't have any regrets about Utah State University. Some of you have heard me tell this story, but, you know, I was a transfer student to Utah State University from Stanford. And I had a great experience at Stanford. Went to Germany for a couple of years for the church and then came here because my family had moved to Logan. I was broke and homesick, and I thought, well, I'll go to Utah State for a year, and then I'll go back to Stanford. And I absolutely fell in love with going to college here on this campus. There was one problem that I had, and that was I had so many people coming up to me and saying, why would you even consider transferring to Utah State when you could have stayed at Stanford? And it bugged me. It really bothered me a lot, and I thought about it for a while, and the answer I came up with was, well, to get a better education. Why else would you transfer from Stanford to Utah State University?
Makes sense to me.
And then, as I thought about that, I realized that if that was going to be true, it was going to have to depend on me. And the notion I came up with was that I had to own my own education. And I think that's what Larry is saying about this idea about earn a mentor. If you want somebody to mentor you, you've got to own that responsibility. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. You know, don't feel sorry for yourself because it hasn't happened. Don't wait for the world to be fair. Go out and own it and earn it yourself.
You know, it's what I call the manna effect. You remember in the Old Testament, manna came to the nation of Israel, and it just plop. It was right there every day. I tell this to the boys all the time. I tell them about the manna problem, is that nothing good in life will ever happen to you by wishing, wanting, or hoping. It's not like plop. There's the manna. I'm going to walk out of Utah State and make $1 million a year. Ain't going to happen, guys. Okay? I hope it does, because then I'm going to hit you up for a donation.
So will I.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Nothing good comes by wishing, wanting, hoping, or whining. It comes about by doing. It's getting out of the boat and driving the wagon. Another question or comment? No questions or comments? Yes, here's one.
How much longer do you plan on coaching?
The question is, how much longer do I plan on coaching?
This is Kathy Gelwix's wife. Let's recognize Kathy Gelwix.
And I agree with that. There's no way I could have done this without Kathy's support. She kept things going while I'm out having fun running around with the team. How long to attend coaching? I don't know. I take it 1 year at a time now, but I have always had this feeling that I will know when it's time to retire, and it'll be tough. It's been part of my life for my whole life. But I'll know. And when it's that time, I'll retire with no regrets. Questions or comments? The gentleman right here.
How do you keep your family balanced with your team, your work, going to Africa?
The question is, how do you keep balance with family and work and going to Africa? Maybe I should ask Kathy that. You know, if we're even speaking at the end of rugby season, it's a major victory for me. You know, I usually say, can I stay in the house another week? You know, it's tough. But what you have to do, and I can't say that I've always succeeded at it, sometimes I've failed, is you have to set the priority of what is really important first. You know, you set your long-term goals of what you want to do with your life, of who you want to be, what type of father, what type of husband you want to be, and then you let all your short-term goals be governed by the long-term objective. Usually we make the short-term goals first, and they decide our long-term goals. That's part of the issue of who, not what, do you want to be behind it.
I was going to say, have you ever been offered or looked looked into coaching like the U.S. rugby team or maybe like a Super 14?
You know, I was thinking about applying for the Aggie football job. But you got a good one in Gary with that. The question is, have I been offered other jobs? I've been offered, I've had BYU and Utah both offer me the head coaching job, and they're top 5 in the nation. Twice I've been offered, asked to coach one of the USA national teams, and I've turned them all down. This is where I want to be. You know, doesn't matter who scores, only matters that we score. And I think, you know, I can't change the world, but maybe I can influence in a positive way 100+ young men every year to grow up with their feet on the ground, with their heads screwed tight on their shoulders, and hopefully avoid a lot of the junk of life. With that.
Larry, I can't help but, you know, as I've watched you coach, as I've been to the national championships and I've had a chance to see, you know, your players play, had a chance to, of course, to have our kids come home and, you know, after the game.
In one piece?
Well,
sometimes.
not always.
Okay.
But it's, you know, as much as you love the game, as much as you love winning, it's really not about rugby for you.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's I don't coach players. I coach young men. That's true. I coach young men. I don't coach players. And, you know, and I don't mean this in any funny way. If it were only about rugby, I would have retired a long time ago. I mean, at 18 national championships. I've accomplished everything I possibly could have wanted. And, you know, I look back in a moment of self-discovery, Doug. You know, I look back and I think in those early years, it was a lot about winning, and there was a great ego rush, and you know, and so be it. But I think as I grew up and matured, I don't make sense. I am very competitive. I'm very intense, but it's not about rugby. I don't coach players. I coach young men. I had a couple of hands over. We have about 4 minutes, and we will quit on time. Yes, ma'am.
You've accomplished so much as a person, as a professional, as a coach. Is there anything left on your life's checklist that you kind of hope to do or accomplish?
Well, I thought after this meeting I'd go out and touch and heal people around the campus. I'm going to join Obama, you know, and I should have been the VP selection. Pardon me for making light of your question. I just couldn't. I say stupid things all the time. Yeah, there is. I want to be a better coach. I want to be a better employer. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better father. I want to be a better grandfather. I want to be a better person. And that is, for me, who I want to be, not what. And that, for me, is I still continue to focus on the final score. And this gets to how you treat people. We got just a couple minutes. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I had dinner with Carl Icahn. You know, made a fortune in option trading, arbitrage. I mean, Doug, if there was ever an arbitrage king, it's Carl Icahn. It was a great honor.
Hostile takeover.
Yes, yes, a very hostile takeover. And he invited me and 9 other people to come back and have dinner. And I flew back to New York. It was one of the great experiences of my life. We had dinner. It was just the 10 of us sitting there. And it was a couple hours. And I'll never forget something. Carl Icahn is not a horizontal leader. But I learned something from him that night. I learned a lot of things about business. But I learned something that night from Carl Icahn, one of the great financial guys of our generation. As the dinner broke up, Carl and I were just talking, just the 2 of us, talking about something, and one of his, you know, my people, one of his people, one of his lieutenants, one of his guys, came up with something, I guess, rather urgent, and came up and put his hand on his shoulder and started to talk to him. And I was mid-sentence, and I just stopped, you know. And I remember what Carl Icahn did. He is a great listener. I learned that from him. When you're talking to him, you had his undivided attention. And I remember when this guy came up and tapped him on the shoulder, he just went like this. And he never lost his eye contact with me. And he said, please finish, Larry. And then he said, wait just a moment. And the guy waited. I quickly finished my sentence. I was going to be respectful of him. And then he said, excuse me for just one moment. And then he went and talked to this guy. Now, he didn't need me, did he? But he treated me with such courtesy and respect. He's a tough guy. I mean, a really tough guy. And he could benefit from this talk I gave today. But I learned a lesson from Carl Icahn. What's he worth, $14 billion or something like that? I mean, he's done very well. But he listened. And I felt what I had to say when he was asking my opinion on some issues was important to him. And he did not allow himself to be interrupted. It gets down to people and how you treat and view people. And I want you to watch how you treat people that you don't need. And you do that, and you'll be a great success in life.
What a great way to